Thank you so much, dear. This is very kind of you.
It's no problem. I'm happy to help. Where are we going?
The truth is now laid bare before you. We have the evidence to prove it.
I never realized how much time I wasted.
You still have time, Dad. It's not too late to make things right.
The strangest thing about losing someone is that sometimes you do not realize what they meant to your life until the silence starts doing their job. Olivia Bennett heard the laughter before she stepped into the ballroom, and for a moment she stood alone outside the double doors, staring at her reflection in the polished glass. 20 years of marriage, 20 years of birthdays remembered, bills paid on time, appointments scheduled, forgotten anniversaries forgiven, and small sacrifices made so quietly that nobody ever noticed them. Tonight was supposed to celebrate all of it. Instead, as she entered the room, she felt like a guest at someone else's life. Crystal chandeliers glowed above hundreds of guests gathered inside the country club overlooking Lake Michigan. Servers moved between tables carrying trays of sparkling drinks, while a jazz band played softly near the stage. Daniel Bennett stood near the center of the room surrounded by business partners, smiling in a way he had not smiled at Olivia in years. Their daughter Emma stood nearby scrolling through her phone. Margaret Bennett, Daniel's mother, occupied her usual place at the family table like a queen surveying her kingdom. Olivia adjusted the sleeve of her navy blue dress. It was elegant, simple, and several years old. She had considered buying a new one but decided against spending the money. There were always more important things. There always had been. "There she is," Margaret announced loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Several heads turned. Olivia smiled politely. "Good evening, Margaret." Margaret's eyes moved slowly over the dress. "I suppose some things never change." A few people chuckled. Olivia pretended not to notice. Daniel heard the comment. Olivia knew he had because she saw his shoulders stiffen slightly. He could have said something. He could have redirected the conversation. Instead, he took a sip of his drink and looked away. The laughter grew. Not cruel. Not dramatic. Somehow that made it worse. It was casual. Comfortable. The kind of laughter people share when they assume nobody important is being hurt. Olivia sat quietly while conversations continued around her. Guests praised Daniel's success. They admired his company's growth. They spoke about investment opportunities, vacation homes, and future plans. Nobody asked Olivia a single question. Nobody noticed she had spent the entire afternoon helping organize the event. Nobody knew she had personally handled 3 separate crises that week to make sure Daniel could focus on work. Nobody knew because Olivia never told them. Halfway through dinner, Margaret raised her glass. "To Daniel," she declared. "The reason this family has everything it does today." Applause followed immediately. Olivia looked down at her plate. Then she heard someone ask the question that changed everything. "And what exactly has Olivia contributed all these years?" The table erupted with laughter. Not everyone laughed, but enough did. Olivia slowly lifted her eyes toward Daniel. For one brief second she believed he would finally speak. Defend her. Correct them. Tell the truth. Instead, he forced an uncomfortable smile and said nothing. The room moved on. The conversation continued. The music played. Glasses clinked. Nobody realized that at that exact moment, something inside Olivia Bennett quietly came to an end. Olivia remained seated for several minutes after the laughter faded. Not because she was shocked, but because she was finally tired. Tired in a way sleep could never fix. Across the room, conversations returned to business deals, vacation plans, and market forecasts as if nothing important had happened. Daniel was already speaking with another group of investors. Emma was taking photographs with friends. Margaret looked pleased with herself. The evening continued exactly as everyone expected. That was the moment Olivia understood something painful. The room had not become cruel overnight. This had been building for years. She had simply refused to see it. She quietly stood from her chair and slipped away from the table. No one stopped her. No one asked where she was going. Outside, The cool air from the lake wrapped around her shoulders. The parking lot lights reflected against rows of luxury vehicles. Olivia sat alone on a bench overlooking the water and listened to the distant sound of music. Drifting from the ballroom. 20 years. The number echoed in her mind. 20 years of waking before everyone else. 20 years of remembering birthdays, school events, medical appointments, anniversaries, tax deadlines, insurance renewals, and every invisible responsibility that kept a family functioning. She remembered staying up all night when Emma had pneumonia at 8 years old. She remembered driving Margaret to doctor appointments while Daniel traveled for work. She remembered selling jewelry she inherited from her grandmother during a difficult financial period because Daniel needed cash to keep a business project alive. Nobody knew about that sacrifice. She had never told them. At the time, it felt natural. Families helped each other. That was what love meant. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel appeared. "Where are you? Some guests are asking for photos." Olivia stared at the screen for several seconds. Not "are you okay?" Not "can we talk?" Not "I am sorry." Only photos. She placed the phone back into her purse without replying. A few minutes later, another message arrived. Emma had sent it. "Mom, Grandma was joking. Do not make this a big deal." Olivia smiled sadly. Even her daughter believed the problem was her reaction rather than the humiliation itself. She looked across the dark water and felt something unexpected. Not anger. Not revenge. Relief. For the first time in years, she was completely honest with herself. She no longer wanted to convince people of her value. She no longer wanted to earn respect from people who benefited from her silence. The ballroom doors opened behind her. She heard laughter again. Familiar voices. Familiar people. Familiar disappointment. Olivia slowly stood and walked toward her car. Inside her purse rested a small envelope she had carried for nearly 3 months. She had written the letter after one particularly lonely night but never found the courage to use it. Tonight she finally did. She drove home through the quiet streets of Chicago, arrived just after midnight, and entered the house that no longer felt like hers. Upstairs, everyone was still at the party. The rooms were silent. Olivia walked into her bedroom, opened the dresser, and removed a simple gold wedding ring. She placed it beside the envelope on the nightstand. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room one final time. By sunrise, the chair at breakfast would be empty. The sun had not yet risen when Olivia Bennett quietly carried the last suitcase to her car. The neighborhood was still asleep. Streetlights cast pale circles across the empty road, while a cool breeze moved through the trees lining the quiet suburban street. She stood beside the vehicle for a moment and looked back at the house. It was beautiful. Large windows, perfect landscaping, a 3-car garage. Everything she and Daniel had worked for over 2 decades. Yet as she stared at it, she realized she felt no desire to walk back inside. The sadness was there, but beneath it was something else. Freedom. Olivia slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. Before pulling away, she reached into her purse and removed her phone. She powered it off completely. No dramatic message. No final argument. No attempt to explain herself. She had spent 20 years explaining. This time she chose silence. 40 minutes later, she was driving north along the shoreline while the first light of dawn appeared across the horizon. Back at the house, Daniel arrived home shortly after 1 in the morning and fell asleep without noticing the ring on the nightstand. By 7 o'clock, his alarm sounded. He walked into the bathroom, showered, dressed for work, and headed downstairs. He expected breakfast waiting on the kitchen island. There was none. He frowned slightly and opened the refrigerator. The coffee was not ready. The lunch he usually carried to the office was not prepared. For the first time in years, he had to make his own breakfast. It annoyed him more than it should have. He walked upstairs intending to ask Olivia where she was. That was when he noticed the empty closet. Several hangers remained. Most did not. His eyes shifted toward the nightstand. The wedding ring caught the morning sunlight. Beside it rested the envelope. Daniel stared for several seconds before picking it up. His heart beat faster. The envelope contained only one sheet of paper. He unfolded it carefully. The message was short. Daniel, I am safe. Do not look for me. Emma is old enough to understand that love and sacrifice are not the same thing. One day perhaps you will understand too. Take care of yourself. Olivia. Daniel read the letter twice. Then a third time. There was no anger in the words. No accusations. Somehow that unsettled him more. His phone buzzed. Margaret was calling. Good morning, she said. Tell Olivia not to forget lunch on Sunday. Your cousins are visiting. Daniel looked at the empty side of the bedroom. Mom, Olivia left. A brief silence followed. Then Margaret laughed softly. Do not be ridiculous. She will come back. Daniel wanted to agree. It seemed logical. Olivia had always come back. After every disappointment, after every argument, after every sacrifice, she was always there. Yet as he looked again at the ring resting on the nightstand, a strange feeling settled into his chest. For the first time since he met Olivia Bennett, he was not certain where she was. And for the first time in 20 years, he realized he had no idea what her life looked like when it did not revolve around him. The first day passed with surprising ease. Daniel went to work, attended meetings, answered emails, and convinced himself that Olivia simply needed time. Whenever the thought of the empty closet surfaced, he pushed it away. People did not walk away from 20 years of marriage because of one uncomfortable evening. At least that was what he told himself. Meanwhile, Emma returned home from school and immediately noticed small things that felt different. The house was quieter. There was no note on the refrigerator reminding her about an upcoming dental appointment. No text asking whether she wanted her favorite takeout for dinner. No gentle voice calling from another room asking how her day had gone. Yet even then, neither Emma nor Daniel spoke much about Olivia. They moved through the evening pretending normal life had not changed. The following morning brought the first cracks. Daniel arrived at the office only to discover he had missed an important breakfast meeting with a potential client. The appointment had never been entered into his calendar. For years, Olivia had quietly managed his schedule, double-checking confirmations and reminding him about commitments he constantly forgot. The client was understanding, but the opportunity was gone. Daniel felt irritated and blamed himself for being distracted. Later that afternoon, Margaret called him in frustration. Her prescription refill had not been renewed. She spent 20 minutes complaining about the pharmacy before finally asking, "Did Olivia forget to handle it?" The question lingered in the silence between them. Daniel almost reminded her that Olivia was no longer there, but something stopped him. He realized Margaret still assumed Olivia would somehow solve the problem. At home that evening, Emma opened the pantry and frowned. Groceries were running low. The refrigerator contained random ingredients but no actual plan for meals. The laundry basket was overflowing. A package that needed to be mailed sat untouched near the front door. Small inconveniences, nothing dramatic. Yet each one seemed connected to an invisible system nobody had noticed before. On the third evening after Olivia left, Emma searched for a document she needed for a school scholarship application. She remembered her mother mentioning it months earlier. After checking several drawers, she entered the home office Olivia rarely used. The room looked exactly as it always had. Neat, organized, quiet. Emma opened a cabinet, expecting to find the paperwork immediately. Instead, she found rows of carefully labeled folders. Medical records, insurance policies, tax documents, school forms, family budgets, maintenance schedules. Every detail of their lives had been documented with extraordinary care. Emma sat down slowly and stared at the shelves. There were dozens of folders, hundreds of pages, an entire world of invisible work. She pulled one folder at random and opened it. Inside were records showing years of appointments, payments, reminders, and notes written in Olivia's careful handwriting. The deeper Emma looked, the more uncomfortable she became. For the first time, she began to wonder whether the woman everyone took for granted had been carrying far more than anyone realized. Then her eyes landed on a locked drawer built into the desk. A small brass key rested beside a framed family photograph. Emma hesitated before picking it up. Something told her that whatever waited inside that drawer would change the way she saw her mother forever. Emma stared at the small brass key resting beside the photograph for nearly a minute before finally sliding it into the lock. The drawer opened smoothly, as though Olivia had always known this moment would eventually come. Inside were several neatly organized envelopes, a leather journal, and a stack of documents secured with a blue ribbon. Nothing appeared dramatic at first glance.
No so king confession.
No secret family.
No hidden fortune.
Yet something about the careful arrangement made Emma's heart beat faster. She picked up the top envelope. Written across the front in Olivia's familiar handwriting were 3 simple words. For Emma. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The letter inside was dated almost 2 years earlier. Emma began reading. Her mother described ordinary moments. School concerts, birthday parties, family vacations. But woven between the memories were thoughts Olivia had never spoken aloud. She wrote about feeling invisible. She wrote about smiling through loneliness because she did not want Emma carrying adult burdens. Most painful of all, she wrote that she hoped her daughter would never confuse being loved with being needed. Emma lowered the letter and stared at the wall. She remembered every event mentioned. She remembered her mother being present at all of them. Yet she had never imagined Olivia had felt so alone. A second envelope caught her attention. This one contained financial records. Emma unfolded the documents and immediately recognized the name of her father's company. Several years earlier, Daniel often spoke about a difficult period when the business nearly collapsed. Emma had always believed her father saved everything through determination and hard work. The paperwork told a different story. There were bank transfers, loan documents, and records showing that Olivia had quietly liquidated personal investments she inherited from her grandparents. The total amount exceeded $200,000. Emma checked the figures twice because she thought she was misunderstanding them. The dates matched the exact months the company had struggled. Her mother had rescued the business. Yet Daniel never mentioned it. Emma quickly grabbed her phone and called her father. Daniel arrived home less than an hour later. He found Emma sitting at the office desk surrounded by folders and paperwork. "What happened?" he asked. Emma handed him the documents without speaking. Daniel studied the pages. The color slowly drained from his face. He recognized every account number, every signature, every date. Years ago, Olivia had told him she found a way to help during the crisis. He never asked for details because he was too consumed by survival and later too distracted by success. Looking at the evidence now, he realized the company he proudly called his achievement might not exist without sacrifices he never fully acknowledged. Before either could speak, another folder slipped from the stack and fell open across the desk. Medical bills scattered onto the floor. Emma bent down to collect them and suddenly froze. The patient name printed across the documents was not Olivia. It was Margaret Bennett. Surgery expenses, rehabilitation costs, specialist consultations. Thousands upon thousands of dollars. Every bill marked paid in full. Every payment linked to an account belonging to Olivia Bennett. Emma slowly looked up at her father. Daniel said nothing. For the first time since Olivia disappeared, neither of them could pretend they truly knew the woman who had spent 20 years quietly holding their lives together. Daniel remained standing beside the desk long after Emma finished showing him the documents. Neither of them seemed capable of processing everything they had discovered. The woman they thought they knew had quietly rewritten the history of their family, and somehow she had done it without asking for recognition. Emma slowly reached for the leather journal that still rested inside the drawer. "There is more," she whispered. Daniel nodded. His throat felt tight. Emma opened the journal. Carefully, the first pages contained ordinary entries about family schedules, appointments, and reminders. Then the tone changed. The writing became more personal, more honest. Olivia described moments nobody else remembered. She wrote about sitting alone in hospital waiting rooms while Margaret recovered from surgery. She wrote about driving home late at night after visiting specialists because Daniel was traveling for work. She wrote about feeling grateful when things improved because she believed helping family was a privilege, not a burden. Yet as the years passed, the entries revealed something deeper. Olivia never complained about the sacrifices themselves. What hurt her was the assumption that they required no sacrifice at all. Emma continued turning pages. Several entries described family dinners where her mother felt invisible. Others described celebrations where Daniel received praise while Olivia quietly handled every detail behind the scenes. One passage stopped Emma completely. It was dated 6 months earlier. Today Daniel received an award for leadership. Everyone applauded. I applauded too. I was proud of him. I only wish someone had asked whether I was tired. Emma felt tears forming in her eyes. Daniel lowered his head. For the first time, he remembered dozens of moments he had dismissed as insignificant. Times Olivia looked exhausted. Times she seemed distant. Times she tried to start conversations he postponed because he was busy. At the time, he believed there would always be another opportunity. Suddenly, he was no longer certain. As Emma turned another page, a folded letter slipped from the journal and landed on the desk. The envelope was unopened. On the front, Olivia had written a date from 3 weeks earlier. Daniel carefully unfolded the letter. The words were simple. I am writing this because speaking no longer works. Every time I try to explain how lonely I feel, someone tells me I am being emotional, dramatic, or ungrateful. Perhaps they are right. Or perhaps I have spent so long carrying everyone else's needs that nobody remembers I have needs too. I do not want a perfect family. I only want to feel seen inside my own life. The room became silent. Even the ticking wall clock seemed louder. Emma wiped her eyes. Why did we never notice? She asked softly. Daniel had no answer. At that exact moment his phone rang. The caller identification displayed Margaret's name. He answered immediately. Her voice sounded shaken. Daniel, she said. I found something. He closed his eyes. What is it? Several seconds passed before she spoke again. I found a box in my closet. Olivia put it there years ago. I never opened it. Daniel exchanged a glance with Emma. Then Margaret said the words that made both of them stand completely still. You need to come here right now. There are things about Olivia that none of us ever knew. Daniel and Emma arrived at Margaret Bennett's house less than 30 minutes later. Neither spoke much during the drive. The discoveries of the past 2 days had already overturned everything they believed about Olivia. Yet something in Margaret's voice suggested there was more waiting for them. When they entered the house, Margaret was sitting alone at the dining table. The confidence she normally carried seemed gone. In front of her rested a weathered wooden box. Daniel immediately recognized it. Olivia had given it to Margaret years earlier as a birthday gift. Margaret always kept it on a closet shelf and rarely mentioned it. Why did you never open it? Emma asked quietly. Margaret looked down at her hands. Because I assumed it was sentimental nonsense. The admission hung heavily in the room. Margaret slowly opened the box. Inside were dozens of greeting cards, photographs, receipts, handwritten notes, and carefully organized documents. The first photograph showed Margaret recovering in a hospital bed nearly 10 years earlier. Olivia sat beside her smiling. Margaret stared at the image for several seconds before speaking. I barely remember this day. Emma picked up a folded document beneath the photograph. Her eyes widened as she reviewed the contents. It was a detailed record of transportation schedules, rehabilitation appointments, medication costs, and home care arrangements covering almost 18 months after Margaret's surgery. Every page listed Olivia as the primary contact. Every emergency number led back to Olivia. Every payment confirmation carried Olivia's signature. Daniel felt his chest tighten. You told everyone your insurance handled everything, he said. Margaret nodded slowly. That is what I believed. She opened another folder. More receipts appeared. Specialized equipment, physical therapy, prescription costs, home modifications, expenses totaling tens of thousands of dollars. Yet what caught Margaret's attention was not the money. It was a small handwritten note attached to one receipt. Olivia's handwriting was unmistakable. Mrs. Bennett had a difficult day today. She was frustrated and embarrassed. Remind her that healing takes time. Bring her favorite soup tomorrow. Margaret read the sentence twice. Then a third time. Her eyes began to fill with tears. I never thanked her, she whispered. Nobody answered, because there was nothing to say. The evidence continued. In another envelope they found birthday cards Olivia had purchased but never given away. Notes for family celebrations. Lists of gifts tailored to each person's interests. Small reminders written months in advance to make sure nobody felt forgotten. Daniel slowly realized a painful truth. Olivia had spent years making everyone else feel valued while nobody had taken the time to understand her. Then Emma discovered one final envelope resting at the bottom of the box. Unlike the others, it contained only a single sheet of paper. The date at the top was just 3 weeks old. Olivia had written it shortly before leaving. Margaret unfolded the page with trembling fingers and began reading aloud. The hardest part is not being unappreciated. The hardest part is watching people become so accustomed to your kindness that they stop seeing it entirely. The room fell silent. No one moved. No one spoke. For the first time since Olivia disappeared, each of them understood the same thing. She had not left because of one cruel comment or one painful evening. She had left because 20 years of quiet heartbreak had finally become too heavy to carry. The morning of the fourth day felt different. The shock had faded, replaced by something heavier. Regret was no longer an emotion. It had become a reality that followed Daniel, Emma, and Margaret into every room they entered. The house itself seemed unfamiliar. Every object reminded them of Olivia. Every routine exposed her absence. Daniel found himself standing in the kitchen staring at a coffee mug Olivia used every morning. Emma caught herself reaching for her phone several times a day to send messages she never sent. Even Margaret, who had spent years criticizing Olivia, sat alone for hours rereading old notes and photographs from the wooden box. By noon, Daniel made a decision. We need to find her. Emma looked up immediately. Do you know where she went? Daniel shook his head.
No.
But there has to be something. Together they returned to the home office. This time they searched with a different purpose. Not to uncover more sacrifices. Not to solve a mystery. They wanted to understand Olivia as a person. For years they had only understood her role. Wife, mother, daughter-in-law, caregiver, organizer, problem solver. They had never asked who she was beneath those responsibilities. Hours passed before Emma discovered another notebook hidden between travel guides on a bookshelf. Unlike the journal, this notebook contained dreams. Places Olivia wanted to visit. Books she wanted to read. Goals she hoped to pursue someday. One entry immediately caught Emma's attention. Harbor Point. The place where I remember who I was before everyone needed something from me. Daniel frowned. Harbor Point. Emma flipped through additional pages. The name appeared repeatedly over several years. There were descriptions of ocean views, quiet streets, small cafes, and long walks along the shoreline. Olivia wrote about feeling peaceful there. She wrote that whenever life became overwhelming, she imagined returning. Daniel suddenly remembered a weekend trip they took nearly 25 years earlier before they married. A small coastal town several hours north. Harbor Point. Neither of them had mentioned it in years. Emma looked at him hopefully. Do you think she went there? Daniel stared at the notebook. I think if there is any place she would choose, it is that one. Early the next morning, Daniel and Emma left for Harbor Point. Margaret insisted on coming as well. The drive took nearly 5 hours. During most of the journey, nobody spoke much. Each person was trapped inside private memories. Daniel remembered opportunities to listen that he ignored. Emma remembered moments she dismissed her mother's feelings. Margaret remembered kindness she repaid with criticism. By the time they reached the coast, the sky had begun turning gold with late afternoon sunlight. Harbor Point looked almost exactly as Olivia described. Quiet streets, small shops, white fences, fishing boats rocking gently in the harbor. For the first time in days, Daniel felt nervous. Not about finding Olivia, about what would happen if they did. They spent hours searching. Then, just before sunset, Emma suddenly stopped walking. Across the street, Seated alone outside a small waterfront cafe overlooking the ocean was Olivia Bennett. She was reading a book. A gentle smile rested on her face. For the first time in years, she looked completely at peace. Emma was the first to move. Tears filled her eyes before she even crossed the street. For a moment she looked like a little girl again instead of a teenager trying to act older than she felt. Olivia glanced up from her book and froze. Surprise appeared on her face, followed by something softer. Not anger, not resentment, just sadness mixed with affection. Emma reached her mother and wrapped her arms around her without saying a word. Olivia held her tightly. Neither spoke for several seconds. The ocean breeze moved gently through the harbor, while the evening sun painted the water in shades of gold and orange. Daniel and Margaret remained several feet away. Both seemed uncertain whether they deserved to come any closer. Finally, Emma stepped back and wiped her eyes. "I am sorry," she whispered. Olivia touched her daughter's cheek. "For what?" Emma shook her head. "For not seeing you." The words landed harder than any speech could have. Olivia closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, Daniel had taken a few slow steps forward. He looked older than he had only 4 days earlier. The confidence that once defined him had disappeared. For the first time in decades, he stood before Olivia with nothing to offer except honesty. "I do not know where to begin," he said quietly. Olivia studied him but said nothing. Daniel nodded slowly. "That is fair." He looked out toward the harbor before continuing. "I spent years believing I was carrying everyone. Then I discovered you were carrying all of us." His voice cracked slightly. "And I never even asked whether you were tired." Olivia lowered her gaze. Daniel continued. "I found the documents, the journal, the letters. I found the truth." The small smile that appeared on Olivia's face contained no triumph.
No satisfaction.
Only relief. "Then perhaps now you understand why I left." Daniel nodded immediately.
Ido.
For a moment nobody spoke. The sound of waves gently striking the docks filled the silence. Then Margaret stepped forward. Her eyes were red from crying. Olivia seemed surprised by that more than anything else. Margaret took a deep breath. "I spent years judging you." Her voice trembled. "You gave me kindness and I returned criticism. You gave me loyalty and I returned entitlement." She looked down at her hands. "I cannot change what I did. But I am sorry." Olivia stared at her for several seconds. Then she nodded once. The gesture was small, yet it carried years of pain and forgiveness. As the sun continued sinking toward the horizon, Daniel reached into his jacket pocket. Olivia immediately recognized the wedding ring. He held it in his palm but made no attempt to give it back. "I came here expecting to ask you to return home," he said. "But that would make this about what I want." He closed his hand around the ring. "The truth is that I spent 20 years asking you to build a life around me. I never stopped to learn what kind of life you wanted for yourself." Olivia felt tears forming in her eyes. Daniel smiled sadly. "If you never come back, thank you for everything I never deserved." Silence followed. Then Olivia looked out across the ocean, breathing deeply as the last sunlight touched the water. For the first time in many years, nobody was asking anything from her. The choice belonged entirely to her. And somehow that was the greatest gift any of them had ever given.
Before you leave, take a moment to think about Olivia's story. Family rarely fall apart because one terrible day. More often, they slowly drift apart when gratitude fades and kindness become taken by granted. There may already an Olivia in your life. A parent, a grandparent, a spouse, or a friend who give more than anyone realizes. The tragedy isn't that Olivia left. It is that her family truly appreciated only after she was gone. Love isn't measured by grand gesture. It is found in the small thing that we do every day. Sharing a meal, listening after a hard day, remembering a little moment, or being there without expecting recognition. So ask yourself a simple question. Who has been quietly satisfying for you? And have you ever been thankfully for them? If this story reminds you of someone, reach out, say thank you, and let them know they matter. If you like this story, remember to like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment below. Thanks for watching.